Live from the Icebox Studio in Montgomeryville, Pennsylvania, it's the Bill and Corey Show.
I'm Bill, and as you can see, Corey's not here today. He's got jury duty, so I'll have to get by without him. I had some replacements in mind, some serious, some not so serious. Didn't work out. Someone suggested using a little sock puppet, but I didn't want to tell Corey he got replaced by a sock puppet. So we got some good questions today. First one, you want to put up the first graphic? Yeah, so we got a customer here, and this is a bottom end of a rotometer. And see that little S? That's not supposed to be there, and it was blocking the float. You see the little stainless steel ball underneath it? That's the float for the rotometer. So that extrusion was at the bottom of the float. It's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be at the top of the float. Purpose of the extrusion is to keep the float from going out of the top of the rotometer. And I took this back to our top technician in the rotometer land, and she knew exactly what tube it was from. Now we have hundreds of tubes that it could be, and this is it could have been a FM 1000, which is our longer scale ones, or an FM 1000s are shorter scales, or FM 1050s. Could have been either one. Thanks. But she knew exactly what tube it was, and she said it was the K871 tube. It's actually a popular tube, and when it happened there is it slipped down. It's like, gee, why would that one slip down? They want to zoom in. This is a K871 tube. I don't know if you can see it. This top of the scale, that 5 is right near the top. Well, you have to have the extrusion put in the tube such that you can read the float, and you're reading the middle of the float here to get the right reading, and it's right at the top. So you've got a really, really small. They've got to cut them kind of thin. I'm going to try to get it out here and show you. Oops. I don't have a little, there it is. So that's kind of a thin cut there, and I guess what happened, this is also in a piece of machinery that had a lot of vibration. So I guess it kind of tipped and fell in. And anyway, still keep zooming in. This is a standard one. This is another popular tube that, and I don't know if you can really see, the extrusion is a little bit thicker, and you can put it down further in the tube. So yeah, it's really hard to show there. So there's more meat there to hold it in place. So I am not going to be able to put this in the tube right, and it's probably just going to fall right in there, just like that. So it's all screwed up. So yeah, that's, you can zoom back out. There we go. So there's, now part of this is the design of the tube. You really don't want to have the tube with the top graduation really close to the top, because you want to be able to fit the extrusions in there to keep the ball from flying out. So when you're designing a new tube, and this is a direct read scale, there's 8 different size tubes you could pick from with different flow ranges. That's the glass tubes. And then there's float materials you can pick. You've got, for the lightest float material we have is glass. Next up is sapphire, then stainless steel. This tube that I showed you had a stainless steel float in it. Then next goes the carbaloy and tantalum, and those are heavier. So if you have a really high flow rate, you might be going with a tantalum or carbaloy. Like I said, in this case, it's stainless steel. So it's kind of a balancing act when you're designing a new tube. You want to have the top end of the scale near the top of the tube. You don't want to have it, if they want this, in this case, they wanted 5 liters a minute at the top end. You don't want to have it in the middle. The tube's more accurate at the top end. So it's a balancing act when you're making this tube. So this, out of all the tubes you make, this is the one that's most likely to have the extrusion work its way out of good position. So, okay, next question we got is on a T-Purge. And some said, I purchased a 4754-350 T-Purge. Can the fittings be changed out to a CGA 330 fittings? Now, you want to zoom in on this? Now, this is a T-Purge with for CGA 350, which is for flammable gases. And they wanted to switch it out to 330, which is typically for corrosive gases, corrosive and toxic. Now, if you could see here, wish we could zoom in anymore, these fittings are welded in here. So this CGA is welded into the body, and this is the bushing on the outlet, and that's also welded in the body. Now, the T-Purge goes between the cylinder would be over here, and this would be the regulator. So it'd be the regulator would have the same type of nut and tail piece on there to attach to it. And you would use this to purge nitrogen in, purge nitrogen through your system. It's not as quite as effective as a cross purge, but a lot of times it'll do the job you need. And it's got a diaphragm valve to help regulate the flow of nitrogen coming in, and a check valve here to prevent backflow of your gas into your nitrogen purge gas. So yes, you can't swap these things out. They're welded in there. The reason why they're welded in there is that they don't want people swapping out fittings and making adapters that are unsafe. So let's say you take something that's for flammable gas service, and now you're like, oh, okay, I want to have it for oxygen. Then you have oxygen going in and potentially go in your gas stream that has flammable gas. Then you can have an explosion or fire. So that's why they're welded in there. So you can't swap them out. So you'd have to just get a new one that fits this. I'm going to show you the cross purge. We got one here, one of our props. So the cross purge is really nice. So it'll have the same purge gas inlet valve and check valve, so you can purge in nitrogen. It also has isolation valve for the regulator and a vent valve down here. So you can get a more effective purge setup with a cross purge. And they get, and we hard pipe these into the regulator. We don't do a bushing and a CGA fitting. They're hard piped in here. It helps make it shorter, and then less chance to be people messing around with it. So this is so this is a cross purge, a much more effective way of purging, but it's going to cost more than a T-Purge. Okay, next question. I always like these. These are always kind of fun. This is an old regular identification and replacement. You want to put up the next slide? Okay, so we got a picture of a regulator, and they said, we recently purchased this, and they wanted to have a replacement for it. Now, when you get these photos to help identify a replacement, you kind of look at different things here. And you see this, it's connected up to a rubber hose, like a welding hose. So that's telling me it's not a really super high purity, and I can tell some other things it's not super high purity too. You want to go to the next slide? Okay, the inlet, you look at the inlet fitting, that very much looks like a CGA 580 inlet fitting. So it's going to be an inert gas. And you kind of look at the body, and that's a forged brass body. And you want to go to the next one there. Okay, and this has the gauges on it can tell you a lot too about delivery pressure. And what's interesting is the gauge on the right says Matheson, and that's our old logo. It tells you an old regulator. We stopped selling this regulator probably over 20 years ago. This is an old, probably an old B15 regulator, which is forged, two-stage forged brass body with stainless steel diaphragm. They called it back then in the day, it was like an economy corrosive service regulator. Nowadays we would go with a stainless steel Monel for a corrosive service. But if you look at I pulled up, we'll show this later, catalog page for this, but you can see the gauge on the left is different. originally the gauge in there would have been 100 psi because the delivery pressure is 50 psi on this regulator, but I guess they wanted to be a little more resolution. They might have been using it below that pressure. So they swapped it out more on their own gauges. And you want to go to the next slide? Okay, yeah, this is the old catalog page for the B15 and B16 dual stage corrosion resistant regulator. You can see kind of the odd configuration of the gauge. Kind of instead of coming out of the body at an angle, it just comes straight up, inlet and outlet. And you got the outlet valve on the bottom. It's a needle valve. So this is more of your economy type regulator. Yeah, so this is just, it just tells you that you can get this information. We have an old regulator guide or old regulator cross-reference on the online store, store.mathesongas.com. Go to the Help Center, and you'll see the old regulator cross-reference. And you can pull up the old catalog pages and the recommended replacements. Now, sometimes that's because it's corrosive service. It's on that table suggested it be another corrosive service regulator. But in this case, because it looks like it's a welding type application or a lower purity, suggests you to go with a Model 81 regulator for this application. This is a dual stage, just like the B15 is. And it's got, this has neoprene or rubber type diaphragms on it, not a stainless steel. And I don't think you really need to have a stainless steel diaphragm if you got a rubber welding hose on the outlet. So yeah, this is probably the regulator you would recommend. And you want to zoom in on, I want to show the gauge, your delivery pressure gauge. There we go. I don't really see that delivery pressure gauge goes up to 100 psi. And you really want to be operating kind of in the middle of the gauge when you're, that's going to be your most accurate part of the gauge. And it allows you, and it's better for longer service. You can zoom back out. Yeah, so in that application, this is the regulator suggested. It's an economy. It's a forged brass body, neoprene rubber type diaphragms. So that's what you go with that. That's all the questions we're going to cover for this week. I'm not sure if we're going to have a leftovers with Bill and Corey. It'll have to be. He's got jury duty through tomorrow, so we'll have to see Monday if we feel like doing it or not. That's just our podcast setup. So tune in again next week. We should have Corey back from jury duty. I sure hope so. So next Thursday at 10 a.m., set your VCRs.